Hello and welcome to the Kelly Kitley podcast, America's Social Worker Unfiltered. I have been trying to get Dr. John Duffy, my friend, colleague, mentor, superstar, friend, all the things. But he is the busiest therapist I know. So our time today is so precious. And John is a psychologist, best-selling author, speaker, and national media personality. He's also hosted his own podcast with his wife, Julie, and has written 3 books: The Available Parent, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety, and Rescuing Our Sons. And on Substack, he releases amazing content every week. So I will put all of these links to find John in the show notes, but I am just so happy to dive in. You have been a mentor to me and somebody I looked up to from the beginning of my career, seeing you on the Steve Harvey show. And I was like, I want to be like Dr. D. And so you had some big shoes to fill, and thank you for leading the way. I'm just so happy to have you on today.
Oh gosh, Kelly, thank you. But you are, I honor everything that you've done and that you're doing, and you spread the good word better than anybody I know. So I'm grateful to you for everything you're out there doing, including this podcast.
Thank you so much. You know, there's so many topics we can dive into. And something that I woke up to this morning after doing a segment the other day about the decrease in alcohol consumption has been the lowest it's been in 90 years. And
Yes.
your Substack is about the booze and why that might not be the best thing. And I think for listeners who are middle age, who are raising teenagers and college students, which is a big part of my demographic, of people that I serve, and you with the families that you work with and your
Yeah.
area of expertise, I do want to hone in on boys and young men specifically today, because that's something that I think we're all kind of trial by fire, and if we can get some expertise with that. But can you speak to the article you wrote this morning?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Both of our families, Kelly, have been touched by alcohol and alcoholism in really profound ways. I don't know how much you know about my family story, but my father was in AA. I was born on his third anniversary. I remember thinking, why
Wow.
does Dad get a cake on my birthday?
It's about me, not him.
Right, it's about me. And then when I realized what he had done, I was like, oh, this is Dad's day. Like I
Mhm.
didn't do anything. Um, and my younger brother, who died by suicide back in 2001 now, a long time ago, also was alcoholic. And now we see this precipitous drop in alcohol consumption. And in large part, I found myself like having this celebratory feeling toward it. I don't drink and I never have, and you know that. And I remember thinking like, I hear this from a bunch of my clients. They're drawn to a more healthy lifestyle. They don't want to lose the next day. They don't want to injure their organs, and they don't they want to be able to think clearly. And I love that. There's also this counterpoint I have where I know that there are other drugs taking the place of alcohol in a lot of people's lives.
Mhm.
In the young men I work with, just to tie this together a little bit, weed, cannabis is so prevalent in their lives and they withdraw. So as opposed to being, social, where most people who are out there drinking,
Mhm.
not everybody,
Yeah.
but more, I think by percentage more are at least connected and they are social. And I'm not sure alcohol is requisite for that,
Mhm.
but I can see post-pandemic that it provides a context for it at the very least, whereas weed suggests solitude, right? And it tends to be this kind of spiral downward in terms of mood and well-being. And so that has my attention. Other prescription drugs and abuse of those has my attention. So I have this real mixed feeling about what's going on right now with this drop in alcohol, because I can celebrate it on one hand. I'm kind of like, ooh, what does that mean for connection on the other? And I like,
Really?
some NA, non-alcoholic bars showing up here and there, which I think is really cool. And suggests like we just need that context. We need a place where they're playing music and everybody's gathering, but we need to gather. We need to have some fun because there's a dearth of that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I loved about it is it challenged my thinking. And having four teenagers myself, I have always educated about alcohol use and
Sure.
the higher predisposition they have for developing dependency and abuse. And, we do kind of lump in marijuana to that too,
Of course.
However, you are absolutely right. I mean, the edibles and, this, are they smoking
Vaping.
it, vaping? What about rolling a good old joint like people did when we were growing up, But it's that isolation piece. But gosh, it's so loaded because at the core of it, what are people doing? They're numbing out, no matter
Yep.
what it is.
Exactly right. Yes, I mean, I think we both prefer. I'm going to speak for I'll speak for me. And I'm curious to hear what you think, but I would prefer we don't do any of it. You know what I mean? If I had the luxury of like eradicating
Mhm.
both from the planet, I would take that. I'd take that and find other ways to connect. We just don't have that luxury. But
No, and
would
we have to
you?
be real, and we're realists as well.
Yes.
So, the marijuana can be harm reduction, but I think as you said too, the alcohol use and drug use is a symptom of something. So underneath
Yeah.
that, is it anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, trauma? What is the desire to use to numb out? And so, mental health wise, what are you seeing in your practice? I know you've touched on things. I've been to speaking engagements of yours where you've talked about, gaming addiction and you've talked about pornography. And so, are there themes that you're noticing in the young men that you see today?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, Kelly. And the primary theme, and what I wrote my book about and what I've been speaking about for the last year and a half or so is the disconnection. Like these young men feel disconnected from each other. They feel they're studies that show that they're disconnected from young women. They're people are dating less, people are having less sex. This is young men who are tapping out and being down here in the basement with my vape pen and my games. That's safer. I won't be called out. I won't be me too'd and canceled. So there's this anxiety about like what does the future hold for me? And so there's this regression that a lot of, not every young man, but a lot of young men are really resistant to move toward adulthood because they look at their dads, they don't want that life. And they also know, I don't know if I could ever afford that life. I don't know if I don't know if that life is even available to me. And then they hear about how they're kind of vilified culturally. And most every young man I work with says appropriately so. Like most of them recognize like we men have created some severe problems for the women in our lives.
Okay.
But I'm 15 or 16. I haven't done anything, and I'm carrying the cross that you guys created.
Mhm.
This doesn't feel fair, and then there's this inclination to be drawn toward a little bit of that alpha bro culture kind of thing that is so degenerative to them, right? To their psyches,
Mhm.
and they can be radicalized to some extent. Again, they're matter of degrees, right? But I've worked with plenty of young men who are kind of drawing near to that incel culture that feels like, ooh, this is scary, getting them to think differently about themselves and their place in the world and girls and women. That's going to be tricky unless we do something to, mitigate that now.
Do you think this generation that you're treating in your practice are in fact having less sex?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it, Kelly. I try to create an atmosphere in here where we are really, really open about these things. And, I can remember 10 years ago, what I was talking to teenagers and young adults about was always something about like the people they are sexually drawn to, which is so awesome in a way, right?
Yeah.
That's such an exciting part of that time in life.
Hmm.
And I cannot tell you how rarely it comes up unless I'm the one bringing it up, but
Yeah.
hardly ever am I working with a 17-year-old boy who's talking about a crush he has on a girl, the anxiety and the nerves of like, do I do something? Do I ask her out? Could she be interested in me? All that really important developmental stuff that helps us screen out like, what do we want in our adult relationships? That is not happening to the degree it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure. So yes, I am confident this generation's having less sex. And I think if I were talking to a group of parents 10 years ago, they'd be like, oh, 10 years from now, kids are going to be having less sex. Awesome. Like, great. We won't have to have the sex talk. But the truth of the matter is, we need them to be drawn to that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's a
Mhm.
really important developmental part of life, whether we like it or not, whether it's awkward to talk about or not. We need them to connect in that way. Maybe not all the way, but part of the way,
Sure,
in order
an
to
exploratory
learn about
phase,
stuff.
for sure, it's a part of development, and,
Exactly.
it's so funny you say that because, I think the way we both practice is as experts in our field, but also with our own life experience, which makes us
Sure.
more relatable and, hopefully human, but,
Yes.
something something that you said in one of the talks I heard you in, and I brought Connor, our oldest, several years ago. He was just in high school, had just started high school, and now he's a sophomore in college. Um, but you said we don't know how to parent this
No,
generation because we didn't have all of the things that our kids are exposed to. So we can't say things like, well, when I was your age, because we have no fucking clue. And what's so funny is we do have these talks with our kids, beginning of the school year, we sit them down individually, we have family meetings on the regular, and oftentimes my kids will be like, Mom, we are not doing what you were doing at our age,
for
you know,
sure.
for better and for worse.
Yes, right.
It is. I mean, we're learning with them because we've never been exposed to things. So we can't say, oh, when I was your age, fill in the blank, I did this or didn't do this.
Yeah.
We're learning
Yeah.
with them. So how do you?
Parenting is a pioneering event now. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
mhm.
it's not like we can borrow like what we were brought up with. And I think maybe that's true for every generation, but I think our parents were able to borrow a lot from their parents. I know my father parented a lot like my grandfather parented. I parent nothing like my dad did. And I think part of it is that I had to learn from George and I have to learn from these kids I work with, like what's the world like now? Like I would not know anything about social media, Kelly, if it weren't asking like 15-year-olds, like, how does Snapchat work again? Like, what exactly is that? What is a jewel? And exactly, is that weed? Is that nicotine? What am I looking at here?
Sure.
And they're really good teachers if you ask. But if you
Mhm.
don't ask, then whatever's happening behind the closed bedroom door, you are not privy to, and that's an awful lot of their lives, whether we like it or not. On the screen and in the drawer, and the things that are absolutely foreign to us are really important parts of the lives of our kids.
Mm.
And so we have to learn from them, like, what's the deal? And so we have to have these like open, like you and Ryan do, these open, non-judgmental talks with them about like what introduce us to the culture a little bit, like what's going on in your class, what's the vibe? And
Mhm.
by and large, kids will tell you if they don't think you have an agenda of like, oh, I'm gonna get in trouble here. They're circling me and they're gonna nail me. But if it's kind of a true curiosity,
Yeah.
then you learn something. Then you
Yeah.
learn something that you can use, and you can ask a week later, like, how's that going now?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
And look, I have 4 sample sizes in my life. One of them tells us everything that his siblings say, "You tell mom and dad too much," and others that, don't tell us anything even though we say, "We're having open communication." But
Mm.
you, John, are the bridge between hearing what these young people are experiencing and exploring and telling us as parents and saying, listen up. This is what I'm hearing. This is how we can help.
Yeah. I mean, and that's so as you say that, one idea I'm inclined to introduce here is about a year ago, I got a call from a mom of a 10-year-old boy, and I never worked with kids this young. And I told her, like, well, let me find you a referral because I just don't work with kids this young. And she said, I, I want you to work with them. She would not take no for an answer. She
Usually
probably
people's
do it
response
now.
to you, John.
And her point was, I don't want therapy to be an odd concept to him. I want to take the stigma away now, and I want him to just come see you once in a while, so that if and when he feels the need, then he's got a guy, and it doesn't feel weird because he'll know you already.
Yeah.
And that model is something I encourage now people to follow. Is like, find your therapist now for your kids, because most every kid is going to benefit from therapy, and that might have been, we can talk about snowflakes and all this stuff all day long, but the truth of the matter is this is a harsher, crueler world than the one we all grew up in. And so if you find your kid someone to talk to now, then you all have that bridge. And by and large, our kids need to sort through their thoughts with somebody pretty independent, and even this it was a revelation to me, Kelly, working with this 10-year-old boy who's now 11. He does it now. He works through this stuff now. He'll talk through, like, what's going on. And it's striking to me, oh, he's already exposed to all the things, the things I thought, like, by the time they're 13 or 14, they'll be ready for me. Oh, they're already very wise to what's going on in the world and what's going on social media and body image and drugs and alcohol and sex. They are well aware of all of this by the time they are 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not exaggerating at all.
I believe you. I believe you. And the more we can be preventative and proactive, the easier it is for our kids to get the help that they need before they're in crisis, right? Because so many
Exactly,
times
exactly.
we get the call when families are in crisis and it's like, oh my gosh, help, what do we do? Which, we can work with that too, but oftentimes it's helpful if we are a couple steps behind that. Yeah,
100%.
behind
No,
it.
a couple steps ahead, right?
Ahead.
I totally agree, Kelly. Like that is a really big deal, right? We can help a family through a crisis, right? But all that does is get them through the crisis, right? And I've worked with families who will come in and just manage crisis to crisis. And my bias is I find myself, I'm surprised to be pitching therapy so hard here on your
Love it.
podcast.
I love it. Normalize
Right. But my bias is, if you want to decrease the number of things that feel like crisis, have your kids talking to somebody on the regular, and you might be able to mitigate that crisis before it reaches that crescendo.
Sure. Absolutely. And, speaking of that, with your lived experience, I do want to talk about your marriage with Julie
Yeah.
and your son, George, who just got married. Was it last summer, last year?
Yeah, actually got married in May of this year. So it
Oh,
was,
wow.
I
Okay.
know, it seems like a long time ago.
Um, but practicing what you preach and putting that, into a daily life skill and being connected the way that you are with your own son and in an emotional way that, is breaking down what people think men should be, quote unquote, in terms of just not emoting and, I feel like what we see is real on your social media. And go ahead. Did you have something to
I
say
so
about
appreciate that, Kelly, and it is. I listen. Julie and we are not perfect people. We are certainly not perfect parents. I think we would argue this is kind of a funny little anecdote, but when we bought our house, we didn't have I'm a therapist, right? We know how much money therapists make, even if we're crushing it and working really hard.
yes.
And so we ended up with like a house we fell in love with, but a tiny house. And So we ended up kind of in the same space. George's room was the tiniest. It was a closet. I mean, like it was just a an elaborate closet without, hooks and hangers. And so we ended up in the same space a lot. So we didn't have many talks where we were like, George, this is what I want to see in an emotionally intelligent man. We didn't do that a whole lot, but we kind of he just through osmosis, I think we kind of like created that space together. And if I were watching, yeah, I can remember watching some movie, and I can't remember exactly what it was. Oh, it was an Adam Sandler movie where it was called Click, I think, where time moves really fast. Like you can click through your life if you want
Okay.
to do the uncomfortable parts. And by the end, I was crying. And George was crying, so, so there's this kind of like modeling thing of like, yeah, right. It's like okay, we're living the same experience here, so we don't have to have the deep talk about that. We're both
Right.
ugly crying. We're both like laughing at ourselves and how
Yeah.
ridiculous this is. An Adam Sandler movie, for God's sake, but like that's what I suppose if I had a plea for dads, it would be um, if you feel like you need to be austere and stoic and removed, like your dad might have been, that does not work anymore. And you will miss all the good stuff of parenting, of being a father, if you do that. And so, like mom might get a lot of the good stuff, might be a go-to, but man, you want to be a go-to. Like you, because that fuels you, that fuels the emotional bank account. So when things go sideways,
Mhm.
you might have their ear, right? Like in that night they come home drunk or way too late, or you find the condom or whatever thing is that or the vape pen or whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
you can sit down and have the talk if you've been talking. But if you haven't, to just suddenly show up and be the traffic cop, doesn't play very well with today's kids.
I love that. It is the modeling. They don't listen
Yeah,
to what we say anyway, usually. They're watching, right?
right. They're watching.
So
Exactly.
you doing that in that moment gave George permission to do the same.
How I hope it works. And
Sure.
George is now 29 years old. So if there's anything that any dad or mom wants to take away from this, he and I are still really close. Like one of the first things we do every day is we text something to each other. And it's usually not like, I love you so much, have a great day. It's usually like, like the Cubs have crashed this season. What the hell's going on?
I
Or it's
love
some
it.
music, like some piece of music or something. So, like hold on to those connections because they can last forever.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it's not about perfection. And that is
No.
for, the goal. It's about growing in the messy stuff because there's so much messy as we were talking about before we started recording. I mean,
A hundred
this
percent. Oh,
podcast,
yes, yes, exactly.
well,
And if I could just throw this one thought
please.
in, Kelly,
Yeah.
don't as parents, our kids often see us as perfect. I was talking to some parents yesterday about their child who's in college, and very much he's following his dad's footsteps, but really struggling. And I asked dad, have you struggled? And he said, yeah, but I'm not going to tell him that. And I'm like, please tell him that. Please tell
Right.
him that because he thinks that, he has you on this pedestal. So let your kids know, hey, I'm not perfect. I have my foibles. I struggle. I struggle with anxiety. George knows, and most every kid I work with knows I have struggled with anxiety my whole life.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I like being transparent about that because it offers this like explicit permission, like, come on in, like if you're in the anxiety house, bring it. I got you. I've been there. I know what that feels like. I've had a tinge of depression here and there. I've had suicide in my family. In grad school, we were taught very much like, nope, do not overly disclose.
Right.
you
Right.
know,
That's
I think
change.
you and I have been like very open, like, here's my world. It's in a book, both of us, right? You can read about my world.
Right. We're credible. We're psychologically trained and we have lived experience. So,
Exactly.
um, speaking of books, do you have another one in you? I mean, you
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
John,
Yeah.
do tell.
Okay, so briefly, so I lost my brother to suicide generation ago now. And I've worked with so many families who have lost somebody to suicide or whose kids just are kind of chronically struggling emotionally. And I am writing about how families play a role in kind of creating circumstances where that's a possibility. My family, we were definitely in retrospect complicit, you know what I mean? In kind of like giving Tom a nudge toward that instead of like pulling him back to like, no, stay here. We honor you and we love you and we accept you. And I think a lot of families can learn from that experience because we sometimes narrow our definition of success so hard that our kids can't fit in there. And yet they're brilliant in ways we don't know. I learned so much about my brother after he was gone, about how brilliant he was, how loving he was. And I don't want other families to have to learn that way. So
Mm.
it's kind of about that. It's about prevention of the really, really dark stuff or the very worst thing.
Wow. Do you have a publication potential date? We talking next year sometime?
We're talking next year for sure. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly when. I don't know how you write, Kelly, but I tend to write in fragments and bits and pieces, and then I stitch it together somewhere.
Same,
I take a
same,
week and stitch it
absolutely. Voice
together.
texting in the notes, as I'm walking. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, in the bathroom between sessions. That was a good thought. I'm going to record that.
Wherever, however. Um, well, John, I mean, your energy and passion just exudes through this conversation, and you are such a gift. And I have been so lucky to have people in my life introduce me to you through mutual connections and referring clients back and forth. And it's hard to find a male therapist and Black therapists and diverse therapists other
Yeah,
than
therapists of color, of any stripe for sure.
absolutely. And so I think when you find a good one, people glom on. And my hope, as people look for therapists, is that they don't give up if there's not one right fit. It's kind
Right.
of like going to a bad mechanic. You might have to go to a couple before you find your guy. Same
Find
thing
that
with
fit,
therapy.
right? Like,
Find
don't
the
give
fit.
up. Find that fit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
And Kelly, I just want to say I feel the same way about you. You are an enormous gift to this profession, to this world. Keep doing what you're doing as well.
Thank you so
So
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you, John.